The following is a production of Frank DeFreitas and the Internet Museum of Holography.
Hello, this is Frank DeFreitas, and welcome to HoloTalk, the Internet's laser and holography talk show. Our toll-free number is 1-800-458-3525, or you can send an email to holotalk@holoworld.com. We've got telephone calls, we've got emails, we've got special guests coming up, so thank you for tuning in, and let's get this week's show on the road. Hello, this is Frank DeFreitas, and welcome to another week of HoloTalk. We're recording this live at the Discovery Center of Science and Technology, and fairly soon you'll be able to stop by and see us doing the show live. You can come into the center and actually participate in the show. Put you on the air if you want. In any case, if you remember last week I mentioned we had a story about a holography exhibit that's going to be coming into the area. And by the area, I mean if you live in the New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. corridor, and take that west over to Harrisburg and make a rectangle out of that. If you're somewhere in that area, this holography exhibit is going to be a very easy trip for you to go to and see. And this is going to be a major exhibit for lasers and holograms. The latest news that I have as far as an update on this is if this show does indeed come together, I don't think there's any contract signed on this yet, but if this show does indeed come together, it's going to be this summer. So this summer we've got a major laser and holography traveling exhibit that's going to come into this area. Now, if you'd like to have more information on this, and I will keep you up to date as I find out information, you need to send an email to exhibit@holoworld.com. That's exhibit@holoworld.com. I will take your email. I have a special folder made for all the emails that's coming through on the show. And as I get information, I will send that information out to you. But I'll also give updates on the show, too, if you want to get your information that way. But if you do send me an email, you will get it before everybody else. Okay, this is our off week. As you know, every week the show is on the air, but not every week do we have guests. We have guests every other week, and the shows in between, we usually try to get caught up on some of the questions that come through either on the toll-free line or by email. Last week's guest was Brian Monahan, and Brian has a company, Pennsylvania Pulp and Paper, and he came on and told us about desktop holography. They're working with a desktop system there and going to a holo printer. Next week, our guest is going to be Jimmy Wolford, and Jimmy has a company down in Panama, and they're involved with security holography. So we'll be speaking with him, find out a little bit about his company, and maybe get a couple questions answered about how holograms are used in the security industry as well. So you'll want to tune in for that. That's Jimmy Wolford. Okay, we're going to move on and go to a few email questions, and let's see what we have first. Okay, our first question is from Mike, and it's a two-part question. Let's go into the first part here, and Mike says, I'm about to shoot a split-beam reflection hologram. The book calls for a light reading before I shoot it. I got a little confused about the light reading because there are two beams hitting the object. Do I take the reading as I would on a single-beam reflection, concentrating on the reference beam and ignoring the object beam? Well, you wouldn't have two beams if you were doing a single-beam reflection, but I know what you mean there. Or is there another way to do it? No, go in there and take readings of both your object and reference beam. And the way you do the reference beam is typical. You just take your probe and point it down towards the lens or whatever you're using, the angle that reference beam is coming in. And move it around the plate area, and you hold it right in the plane of the plate holder. Move it around and get an average reading. You know, you're going to have a hot spot probably right in the middle if you don't have the beam spread out that much. But you want to spread that beam out enough that you're not going to see that much of a variation from the center of where your hologram is going to be recorded out to the edges. So you try and spread that area out as much as possible. You do lose a lot of power. And if you don't have a lot of power to spare, then you don't want to spread that beam out too much. But you want to try and avoid that hot spot in the middle. You're going to need your object out of place to do this because you got to get your hand right down in there and hold that probe in the plane of the plate holder. Now for the object beam, you just put your object back in there, take the probe, go around the other side, point it toward the object right in the plane of where your film or your plate's going to be, and just go around that object and get a number of different readings. You want to try and keep your ratios for split beam reflection hologram being made directly from an object, probably 2 to 1, where 2 is the reference beam reading and 1 is the object. So if you've got a 40 reading on your scale for the reference beam, you want to try and get a 20 as the maximum for your object. Second part of the question is, I am setting up for a split beam reflection hologram, and the book calls for a 90-10 beam splitter, but it does not say whether the reference beam or object beam should have the greater intensity. Well, once again, the reference beam always has the greater intensity, and you have to take with what you read in the books with a grain of salt, because they're giving just generalizations. I mean, you don't absolutely have to have a 90-10 beam splitter. I've never had a variable beam splitter. I just never spent the money for them. I have a selection of little beam splitters about the size of microscope slides. Some of them are 90-10, 75-25, 60-40, 50-50, and I will use, whatever beam splitter I need to get the ratio that I need. Now, what's going to determine that is the fact of how bright or how much light your object is going to reflect. If you have a bright object that's painted white or something porcelain or something like that, that's obviously going to reflect a lot more laser light than, say, an object that's black or dark. So that's what's going to determine what beam splitter you use when you do your setup, so that you can fall within that ratio. Sometimes you have to give more light to the object beam in order to bring that up if you've got a dark object. And other times, if your object is reflecting a lot of laser light, you can actually cut that object beam back and give more light to the reference. And once again, before I close out on this question, I just want to let you know that there are a number of different formulas that you can use where you plug different numbers in to figure out what your exposure time is going to be, and they go by the intensities and the amount of energy that's being applied to the emulsion over a given amount of time. But for all practical purposes, like with the holography handbook published by Ross Books, you just take if you've got your ratio set up properly, you take your reference beam reading, and that's what you use on the chart to figure out how much time you give for your exposure. Just a reminder to you, the listeners, you can call your questions in on our toll-free number. That number is 1-800-458-3525. There's no charge for the call. Nothing will show up on your phone bill. And we'd love to use your voice on the air. And you can also send email to holotalk@holoworld.com. Send your question, and I'll read your question on the air. So either way, it's okay. It seems like email seems to be the preferred choice, which I guess only makes sense since most people only have one line, and if you're listening to the show, you can send an email right away if you're online without logging off and then picking up the phone. Got an email from Mark Diamond, and Mark wrote to me, a couple of weeks ago, someone sent a question in as to when was the first hologram used on a magazine cover, and I gave the answer of National Geographic in 1984 with the American Eagle. And Mark says, let's see, okay, here we go. The first hologram to appear in a publication, not actually on a cover, was in 1967. It was World Books Science Year. This was actually a transmission type, and a red filter was provided to clean up the light of a flashlight or slide projector, with which you could then transilluminate the hologram. He says he has several of these holograms, and the hologram was made at Conductron, affiliated with McDonnell Douglas in the late 1960s. And I remember this hologram. That does go back quite a way. Mark's got a website. That website's www.diamondimages.com, and Diamond Images is one word. Once again, it's www.diamondimages.com. Go over and check out his website. I have one of his holograms of Dizzy Gillespie. I have his Dizzy Gillespie hologram. It's pretty cool. Okay, our next question. No name on this email. There's an email address, but I won't give that, but there was no name signed to it. And this person says, I am an amateur and have just started holography. I've done 8 holograms, none showing an image. But there is a fuzzy multicolored thing showing some depth, but then a dark shadow in the same shape on every one of my holograms. Every hologram holds an answer. If there's something wrong with your hologram, let's start off by saying that. You do a hologram and you see there's something wrong with it. Every hologram has its own answer as to what the problem is. And after you've done holography for a number of years, you can look at a hologram and tell immediately what it is. A lot of times it's very hard from a description to tell what it is without seeing the actual hologram, and I think this is the case here. I really can't tell what this is that you're talking about without seeing the hologram. So if you're listening to this show, if you could take a picture of the hologram and send that along, or better yet, if you have a website or internet access to a web page, just upload the JPEG of the hologram so maybe a few of us in holography can log on and take a look at it. We can tell you what's going wrong. It's a shame you've done 8 and you're still getting that. But from what you've explained right here in the email, I can't really tell what it is that could be the problem. So if you want to email me again, let me know if there's some way I can take a look at it, or if you want to put it up on the web, a bunch of us that are involved with holography can take a look at it, and we can get back to you as far as what we think would be good corrective measures for that hologram. Okay, we have someone that's writing that's confused in England, and this guy's name's, well, I can't say it's a guy, it's Chris. I guess it could be a young lady as well. Chris writes, is it true that when a hologram shatters, the whole image can be seen in all the broken parts? If so, why does this happen? Well, this is something a lot of people always talk about, the fact that you can take a hologram, break it up into 1,000 pieces, and each one of the pieces contain the entire holographic image. That's true to a point. We've had this question a number of other times on the show. And what actually happens is you can see the image. This happens best with a laser transmission hologram, because laser transmission holograms are made, and usually, more than likely, the object is quite a bit of distance from the holographic plate compared to a reflection hologram where you have the object as close to the plate as possible. When that object is located at quite a bit of distance from the plate, and you break that plate up, you can still see the whole object, but you see it through the perspective of wherever that piece of glass came from. So let's just say, to simplify things, you broke the hologram up into 4 pieces. You've got your upper left, you've got your upper right, you've got your lower left, you've got your lower right. Now, if you picked up the upper left-hand piece, if you looked through that piece, you would be able to see the entire object. However, you'd see it from that perspective. And if you picked up the lower right-hand corner and looked through that piece of glass, you'd still see the whole object, but you'd see it from the perspective of the lower right corner. So that's how that works. Okay, we have an email from Francis, and Francis says, hello, I'm a junior in high school and very interested in holography. I'm wondering if there are any colleges where I could major in holography or at least take some classes in. If not, what would be a good major if I wanted to get into holography? Some sort of physics? Thank you for your time, Francis. Francis, I'm not aware of any majors in holography. I think the Art Institute in Chicago has an art major in holography. While you're listening to this show, because I'm just going to take for granted that you're going to tune in and listen to your answer, if you go to the education wing on my site, you'll see a listing of different courses that you can take for holography. If anyone out there offers courses, please email me, and I'll be happy to put you on a list so people can get in touch with you as well. Royal College of Art in London, I believe, also has a degree program in holography. But physics would be the strong point, I would imagine, if you wanted to get involved with holography. But I'm not quite sure how it's approached from the art end. I know there are a number of different artists who are involved with holography, and a lot of them don't approach it from the science and technology standpoint as much as they approach it from the creative standpoint of an artist. So it depends on what you would want to get out of holography in the end, concerning what it is you should or how you should approach holography as part of your studies. Next question. This is from another Mike. I am doing an experiment on holograms, Mike, holograms for physics. I don't know of any experiments to do. If you have any, I would appreciate any help you could give me. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Mike, for science fair projects, you probably have a lot more to choose from if you were to do experiments with lasers than with holograms, unless you plan on doing some sort of an experiment where you're going to make your own holograms. Once the holograms are made, I can't really think of too many things of doing a science fair project with them. You could do a number of different experiments. Of course, you could get holograms and illuminate them with different lights and find out what the result would be from different lights illuminating the hologram. And, of course, light meaning wavelengths. You're going to take a look and see what different wavelengths do when you illuminate already made holograms with the different wavelengths. And you could compare that with reflection holograms and white light transmission holograms. Even embossed holograms would probably be easiest for you. But outside of actually making holograms, just offhand, I can't think of very many science fair projects you could do with already made holograms. You have a much better choice going with lasers and doing a science fair project working with lasers. All right, so that just about catches us up with our email questions. Don't forget, you can send your questions in. The telephone number is 1-800-458-3525. That's a toll-free number. There's no charge. It doesn't show up on your bill. Leave your question on the voicemail, and we'll use your voice on the air. Or you can send your question to HoloTalk at holoworld.com, and I'll read the question and answer it on the air for you. This was our off week. Next week, our guest is going to be Jimmy Wolford, and he's going to be filling us in on how holograms are used in the security industry. He has a company down in Panama. So this is Frank DeFreitas. Thank you for tuning in. We were doing this live at the Discovery Center of Science and Technology. We'll be doing it live here every week. I also have a new radio show that's going to come up. We're going to record it here live every Sunday. It's going to be a weekly science and technology broadcast. We're going to have area students involved with it, and we'll be doing that live here as well. If you'd like more information about coming out and seeing the show, or even stopping by, I'll put you on the air. No problem with that. Just send an email to me at holotalk@holoworld.com, and just mark in that email I'd like to come out and see the show being done. So I'll send an email back and give you some more information on that. So thank you very much for tuning in. This is Frank DeFreitas for HoloTalk, and we'll see you next week.